a cold day blankets much of a very nervous country, framing the most important election in the history of this young nation. Hello, and welcome to HNN's coverage of Election Night 1800. An uneasy nation faces a possible and hopefully peaceful transition of power from one party to another. President John Adams, two-time vice president to George Washington, did not receive his party's nomination this election. His vice president, Thomas Jefferson, was again nominated by his party, the Democratic Republicans. Facing possible defeat after scandals and controversy besieged the Adams administration, the Federalist Party passed on renominating the president, instead choosing party founder and former Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, as its standard-bearer. Regardless of which man wins, this will be an historic election as the nation chooses between two completely divergent policy paths into an uncertain future. Before we begin, a preemptive point of note. While some states in the Union allow for voting by the populace, not all states use this method to choose its electors who will be voting for president and vice president. As such, we will not be reporting popular vote totals for any state tonight. And now, with results coming in from across the United States, we begin Election Night 1800. It is only appropriate that the first state to sign the U.S. Constitution is the first state to be called. Delaware has given its 3 electoral votes to Alexander Hamilton. This replicates the results from last election as it throws the entirety of its support behind the Federalist candidate. Next up, New Hampshire. And New Hampshire gives all 6 of its electoral votes to the Federalist Alexander Hamilton, another repeat of 1796. New Hampshire's neighbor to the west, Vermont, has given all 4 of its electoral votes to Alexander Hamilton. Massachusetts, the birthplace of the American Revolution and President Adams' home state, continues the Federalist domination of New England. The second biggest prize of the night is in Alexander Hamilton's column. Rhode Island, the smallest state by land in the United States, again gives its 4 electoral votes to Federalist candidate Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton finishes the Federalist sweep of New England by capturing Connecticut. Connecticut has 9 electoral votes, with all of them going to the former Treasury Secretary. Next, New Jersey, which played an important role in the American Revolution, with then General George Washington and the Continental Army spending more time there than any other state during the war. Federalists have secured all of New Jersey's 7 electoral votes for their nominee, Alexander Hamilton. We now have our first state that is too close to call, New York. To clarify, when we declare a state too close to call, it is because the state will be splitting its electoral votes between the candidates, and we're awaiting confirmation of how they will be divided. This could be a blow for Hamilton, as the state went for President Adams in 1796. The worst kept secret in this election was the reasoning behind Vice President Jefferson choosing New York Senator Aaron Burr as his running mate, to help chip away at not only the Federalist hold on the northern states, but specifically New York. Hamilton, however, resides in New York as well. The question is, can he stop the bleeding of support in the state? Pennsylvania, home of the nation's capital, Philadelphia, for the last 10 years until this past May, is too close to call. This is potentially another blow to the Federalist chances. Pennsylvania went solidly for Adams in 1796, winning 14 of Pennsylvania's 15 electoral votes. That number is expected to be significantly lower this election. The state of Maryland is too close to call. In 1796, Maryland split their votes between Adams and Jefferson, with Adams winning a solid majority. Results are believed to be much more equitable this time around. And now the first state for Thomas Jefferson, Kentucky, and its 4 electoral votes go to the vice president, whose Democratic-Republican Party has strengthened their hold on the western states. No surprises, as Virginia has gone for native son Thomas Jefferson. The most populated state in the country, Virginia is Jefferson's home state, but Adams did manage to eke out 1 electoral vote in 1796. In 1800, Jefferson sweeps all 21 electoral votes. In a bit of a surprise, North Carolina is too close to call. While the state split its votes 4 years ago, Adams only collected 1 lone elector, but our information suggests that number is going to be higher this time. This will be a state to watch. Tennessee completes Jefferson's sweep of the West by giving its 3 electoral votes to the vice president. South Carolina, one of the few states that did not support independence until that fateful final vote, has given all 8 of its electoral votes to the author of the Declaration of that independence, Thomas Jefferson. And finally, Georgia, the southernmost state in the nation, has given Thomas Jefferson all of its 4 electoral votes. Now let's take a look at the current state of the electoral map. Alexander Hamilton is in the lead with 49 electoral votes thanks to his sweep of New England. Thomas Jefferson is trailing by 9 with 40 electoral votes, all coming from the west and south of the country. There are still 4 states left uncalled, totaling 49 electoral votes, with 70 needed to claim the presidency. Again, those 4 states are Maryland, surprising North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and the all-important state of New York. And I'm being told we have not 1 but 2 states to call right now. First up is that surprising North Carolina, with Thomas Jefferson collecting 8 of the state's 12 electoral votes. A surprising increase in Federalist support from 4 years ago, but Adams did increase his support there after the election. That support seems to have transferred to Hamilton, who received 4 electoral votes. The second state is Pennsylvania, with severe damage done to Federalist numbers since 1796, when Adams received 14 of the 15 electoral votes. This time, the split was almost down the middle, with Jefferson receiving a majority of 8 electoral votes. Hamilton held on to 7, but that cut Adams' total in half, a result that will surely disturb Federalists. Let's look at the updated map, where you can see Jefferson is closing in on Hamilton. Hamilton's lead has now dropped to only 4 electoral votes. Remember that 4 years ago, Adams only won by a 3-vote margin. While a closer result was considered possible, now the realization may be hitting Federalists that they may not just drop support, but lose the presidency. However, 2 states remain, Maryland and New York, both states that went heavily for Adams in 1796, but where Democratic Republicans have made strong inroads on the legislative level. And we now have another call. The state of Maryland has completely split its electoral votes. 5 for Hamilton, 5 for Jefferson. Even though it's an increase for Jefferson and a decrease for the Federalists, this has to be a disappointment for the vice president, as he only increased his vote totals from last election by 1 vote. Hamilton did see 2 votes lost, but it's important to remember 1 was due to reapportionment, as Maryland lost an electoral vote for this election. A look at the map shows Hamilton maintaining his 4-vote edge over Jefferson, with only New York left to go. New York's 12 electoral votes means a dramatic swing over 1796 will be necessary for Jefferson to win the presidency. Although it should be noted his running mate, Aaron Burr, did work tirelessly to change the makeup of the state's legislature, increasing the number of seats collected by Democratic Republicans. But is it enough? We now have a major projection. Alexander Hamilton, the nation's first Secretary of the Treasury, will be elected the 3rd President of the United States. The state of New York, which went fully for then Vice President John Adams 4 years ago, has split its electoral votes down the middle, much like Maryland, with 6 votes each. This was a huge improvement over 1796 for the vice president, but it was not enough, and Hamilton wins the election and the presidency with 71 electoral votes to Thomas Jefferson's 67. As you can see looking at the map, the geographic divisions within the nation maintained, with Federalists doing well up north and the Democratic Republicans dominating in the South and the West. This means the Federalists maintain power in the nation's capital. Again, breaking news, Alexander Hamilton has been elected the next president of the United States. For everyone here at HNN, I thank you for joining us this evening. Good night.